Good evening, everybody. I commence this evening's discussions by welcoming our speaker for the evening, the poet Kiara Gwala. Welcome also to each one of you present for joining us on this Sunday evening for yet another interesting book discussion. Well, on behalf of all of us present in the hall, may I request Tusharika, where is Tusharika? Tusharika to kindly present a token of welcome to our poet guest, Kiara. I request Sudhir Kasliwal to kindly come forward. He is a distinguished member of our club, to kindly welcome Mr. Jagdeep Singh with a token of appreciation. May I request copies of the books be brought so we can release the books. 4 copies of the book, please.
Mr. Jared, ये आगे पे
हाँ ये भी है।
एक दे दो आप बीच में
पीछे चलो, पीछे को बहुत आगे हो।
कह रहे हैं कविंद्र सिंह
घर की खेती है
ये आगे
सीधा
एक बार
So, I have to get my 2 bits here. Kiara Gwala, whose book of poems has just been released, is all of 14 years of age. She is presently studying in the 10th grade at Jayashree Periwal International School. This debut anthology of poems written by her was published in March this year by Hawakal Publishers. The poems received critical acclaim, and to quote Mr. Kirti Sen Gupta, the publisher, she is a pulsating voice, honest and powerful. Kiara's work explores themes of grief, identity and becoming. She often dwells in the quiet spaces between what is felt and what is said. Through her poetry, she seeks to give voice to emotion that restrict articulation, embracing uncertainty rather than resolution. I have really enjoyed reading the book. In conversation, she will dwell upon the contents in more detail. Well, one observation, or should I say reality, is reflected so articulately by Kiara when she writes, "People destroy their glorious souls trying to fit into a hideous society." And she goes on further. Perhaps reflecting on the
उनको बोलना साउंड
on the way career and occupation.
एक बार देख लो साउंड नहीं आ रही किसी
Yeah, I think I'm loud enough.
maybe take this one.
Progressing nowadays, she writes in another piece, where dancers are glued to desks and where poets are practicing medicines, where singers are silenced as no one listens, and so on she continues. Suffices to say that Kiara's writings are delightful to read. She touches upon the mundane and the sublime in a very insightful manner. Friends, when we introduce a poet in this hall, I always advise that an anthology or collection of poems should be read slowly, not in one go. Each poem, rather each stanza, should be savored very slowly. I repeat that advice for Kiara's book, as she has packed a lot of emotion and feelings in her very concise writings. Today she will be in conversation with Jagdeep Singh on her debut effort. Jagdeep, Jags need little introduction to this audience. He runs his own PR firm in Jaipur for many years now. He is a poet and he is a postgraduate in English and history. He's had a stint as a journalist before he joined St. Xavier School, Jaipur, to teach English. His poems have been published in several poetry journals and magazines, and his first collection, called My Epitaph, was published in 2020. He is currently working on a novella and the reminiscences of his days as a student of the famous Mayo College, Ajmer. Jagdeep Singh, Jags, and I have regularly been hosting book launches and discussions on a monthly basis for many years now in this hall. And for those of you who may not be aware, we've had speakers like Ishwar Desai from UK, Dr. Malashri Lal of the JLF, Daira Khan, another young poet. And last year we celebrated the 250th anniversary of Jane Austen with a panel discussion on her celebrated novels. More recently we had Dr. Karan Singh, the famous Maharaja of Kashmir, in this hall during the GLF. But as Jack mentioned, it is perhaps the first time that we are featuring the daughter of a member of the club, Mr. Dushyant Wala. Dushyant, please. Before we proceed to this evening, I take this opportunity to bring on record our thanks to His Highness Jaipur, the Chief Patron and Life President of the Ashok Club, and to the Rajmata Sahiba for kindly permitting us, the Literary Affairs Committee of the club, to regularly host these book discussions in the club's main dining hall. I also thank Gold Silver, a leading home decor and jewelry brand from the house of Durlabjis, for very graciously supporting our efforts as the gifting partner. Now, Jags, may I request you to kindly proceed with the conversation. Thank you.
Good evening. Am I audible at the back? Okay. मैं वीडियो वालों से निवेदन है कि एक बार वीडियो सेट करके खाली कर दें रास्ता स्टिल फोटोग्राफर से लिए पीछे जो बैठे हैं वो देख नहीं पा रहे बीच में आके दोबारा चेक कर लेना Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At the very outset, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you for coming here on a hot May evening for a book discussion and coming here to, encourage and support a young 14-year-old poet who's written some most remarkable poem, ladies and gentlemen. It was in this very hall 4 years ago that I had the privilege of moderating another young poet, Dania Khan, who also belongs to Jaipur but is studying currently in Mumbai. And she too had published her first anthology of poetry at the age of 14. And it was a great poetry session that evening where she had even gone on to say that she loves the poem Daffodils of Wordsworth, but she, however, doesn't agree with how her teacher has taught her Wordsworth. Which just goes to share, reminds me of the famous quote of Mark Twain, who said, "I will not let schooling interfere with my education." So, just a few days ago, I wrote on my Facebook about Kiara's poems. Ladies and gentlemen, her poems have profundity of thought and poetic sensibility. At this young age, to have that kind of deep thoughts and write about, and what is more important, she's writing, there are two kinds of poems. There are personal poems and there are impersonal poems. Personal poems are also subjective poetry, impersonal poetry is objective poetry. So what she's writing are mainly personal poems, and personal poems which are very honest and which have integrity of experience. So it has been great going through her poems which talk about death, grief, loneliness, nostalgia, loss, longing, letting go, denial, delusion. I could go on and on. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a thin volume of poetry, 33 poems in all, but don't go by its size or thinness. It is a very weighty book. It has a lot of weight because these poems are very, very intense. And ladies and gentlemen, if you still haven't picked up a copy of the poetry which is available at the end, please do pick it up. One thing I would like to mention about her is that, it's very easy to self-publish poetry these days. One can just go to a printer and get your poem published. The famous writer Amish Tripathi, ladies and gentlemen, tells us that how his book was rejected by 17 publishers, and then he went and got his first book, which was about Lord Shiva, which he self-published. And then the people in the world realized what is. But for Kiara, she sent her manuscript or typescript to a well-known publisher in Delhi, Awakal Publishers, who specializes in publishing Indo-English poetry. By Indo-English poetry, I mean Indians writing poetry in English. And the publisher himself, ladies and gentlemen, is an accomplished poet himself. So, I was talking to Mr. Kiran Sengupta, the publisher, and he's telling me, Jags, they calls me Jags, my nickname. It took me only 4 hours to decide that I'm going to publish this poetry. Give her a big hand, ladies and gentlemen. So Kiara, how are you feeling being in center stage? You feeling good?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to ask you, my first question is, the opening act, this is your title of the poetry book. Why have you chosen this title? And you also write that it is connected, that my poems are not answers or conclusions, rather they are an opening act. How would you describe this to the audience?
I hope I'm audible in the back. Okay, so in a summary, the title, the opening act, is a symbol of how I am still learning to navigate the vast sea of life, and it provides beginnings rather than resolutions. And I'm someone, I appreciate theatre a lot. So the starting of a play, it's an opening act. So it is a symbol of how I'm still learning to navigate through life, relationships, expectations, and overall just self-growth.
Okay. You're saying you're writing poetry because you find yourself between loss and becoming, and ending between loss and becoming, between becoming and ending. What exactly do you want to convey by that?
Well, again, I'm 14, so the point here is that adolescence is a very, very big transition, and it's really difficult. Like, I found it very difficult because Firstly, the moment you start to get used to your new self or a new beginning, your old self creeps in and you're grieving that and adapting, and it's a cycle for me. And grief intensified that because I lost two people who I really, really loved. And overall, what I'd like to say here is, so what I wanted to say here is that being a teenager, it's mourning what you lost and learning what it taught you as you become a new person.
Now, before I ask her to read out her poems, I would just like to say what Kirti Sengupta says for Kiara. She is a pulsating voice, honest and powerful. And Professor Malashri Lal of the English department in Delhi University, and an accomplished poet herself, she's written, the opening act carries a refreshing and honest tone that draws readers into the secrets of grief and healing. Through several poems speak of fragmented identity, lost mentors, and a teenager's preference for privacy. There are many sections that seek wholeness and acceptance. This debut collection is a signpost to a long and beautiful path of creativity. Before I ask her to read out some of the poems, ladies and gentlemen, I've collected some lines or a couple of lines from her poems just to give you the poetic depth that she has. Some of the lines which can actually leave you totally zapped, you know. So I'll just read out these lines and then ask her to read a couple of poems. Now, from the man who taught me everything, you were the only one who made silence comfortable. She's writing for her grandfather. Look at this line. You were the only one who made silence comfortable. Look at this depth. Second one. Now the words you taught me slip through my fingers, and I wonder how will I ever hold on to them. Yet another. You taught me everything, but not this, not how to live without you. These are some of the poems. There's a lovely poem here called The Mango Season. I told myself I'll join you later. Now later is all I have left. Now in this poem the grandfather is calling the granddaughter to come down to the dining table and have mangoes with him. But she doesn't come, saying that I'll come later, and she doesn't come. And it's a very graphic description of now she goes every evening missing her grandfather and trying to have mangoes like this. I didn't come then, so now I come every night. Instead, I always save the best lies for you. So there are some more poems which I'll read in between. It's okay.
It's okay.
So these are very poignant poems on your grandfather. Would you like to read out the second stanza of The Man Who Taught Me Everything?
I keep looking for you in empty corners, in familiar smells, in the echoes of your laughter that faded too quickly. You taught me everything, but not this, not how to live without you. And yet here I am, holding on to every lesson, every laugh, every moment you gave me, trying to remember how to cut an onion without crying. You were my everything, and now you are everywhere. In the air I breathe, in the tears I cry, in the strength I don't think I have. You're gone, but you're not. And I will love and honor you in every way I know how, for every day while I exist.
Would you also like to read out some lines from the Mango Season? It is such a beautiful poem.
I told myself I'll join you later. Now later is all I have left. At night, when my world finally comes, I come downstairs anyway and sit on the floor across your altar. I try to cut a mango the way I remember you would. The juice always drips down my wrists. I take slow bites. And I always end up crying between them, because this is the only place where my body feels rooted in. I didn't come then, so now I come every night instead. I always save the best slice for you, not as tradition, not as ritual, but as my own way of saying, I'm here, and I've finally come down to eat.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can see imagery is a very powerful literary device which we use in poetry. And her image is very strong. There's another poem of her, if you read these poems, how a grandfather is cutting onions on the dining table, or how he is having a mango, and there's a beautiful line in this Mango Season, how the mango when she cuts, the juice is slipping through her fingers. I think it's absolutely amazing, you know. Ladies and gentlemen, Wordsworth had very famously said that poetry is a powerful overflow of emotion. Powerful, spontaneous overflow of emotion. And since, Kiara, you're writing personal poetry, you're writing subjective poems about yourself, about what you experience. So how do you write? Does it come to you spontaneously, a poem, or do you have to manufacture it, work hard on it? And after having written, do you revise your poems?
I like to say that, very honestly, I have spurs of writing where I can just go on and on for hours on end and not stop. And that is when I'm very emotionally overwhelmed. It's a coping mechanism for me. So initially, when I write spontaneously, there's a lot of rawness, there's a lot of emotion. And sometimes that can make the poem not very understandable to the audience. So the next day, what I like to do is, with a cool mind, I go over the poems again and I try to make it a little more coherent. But at the same time, I don't want it to lose its rawness. I still want it to evoke something in the readers. So the first draft has the emotions, a lot of them. But the second, going over that, revising, it's the fine-tuning which makes it even better.
So I think this is a great answer, that the seed of the poem comes first, and the spontaneous feelings are written down, and she agrees that later she revises a poem, which is so important. For all the contemporary poets who are teaching you to write poetry, ladies and gentlemen, they always say, revise, revise. There is also a thing known as a pickling effect, where you write a poem and forget about it, and then see it after 10 days and how you feel about it, read it out loud. So I'm very glad you are revising, and which is why her poems are so tightly structured, which is a very important part of your modern contemporary poetry. Poems have to be structured. There should not be a single word or a punctuation mark which is superfluous there. Now, before I ask her to read out another poem or discuss another poem, I'll just read out some more of her lines. This is from a poem, Incomplete. Look at these lines. I hold thousands of beginnings. None of them ever met their end. Look at this, a poem from Ghost, which is a death poem. A 14-year-old girl writing about death. Don't love me in past tense. Don't gather pieces of me after I'm gone and reduce me to your grief. Then there's a poem on love, loss, and delusion. You talk about the universe, not even realizing that you are the one I live in. And have a look at this, alone without you. I truly miss what we had, but it wasn't love. I was more lonely in your presence than I ever was. Look at this line, I was more lonely in your presence. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the hallmark of great poetry, absolutely. So, Kiara, my last poetry anthology was written when gods don't matter. And I got a lot of flack for it. People accused me of being an atheist or an agnostic, and there's been a lot of discussion on what I believe in God or I don't believe in God. So it's become, for the last 6 months, my anthology, wherever it was discussed, God is an important part. So Kiara has also written a poem on divine presence. So how much has the divine presence helped you? And you say, but at Prabhu's feet, I finally found a place. At Prabhu's feet, I finally found a place. So your thoughts on God?
My thoughts on God. This is a deeply personal poem. I've always felt that I never really belonged to my culture. I've never really felt Indian, if that makes sense. Like, for example, when I'm with people my age, they say I'm too Indian. When I am with people older than me, they say I'm not Indian enough. So when I go to Prabhu, when I pray, it's a form of meditation for me. It's a place where I can find refuge without the fear of being judged by anyone. I am who I am his creation. So that's why this poem is a reflection of my journey with faith as someone who isn't as attached to their culture as they should be. So that's that.
Can you read out the first 5 lines of the poem Divine Presence?
I never really learned how to worship correctly, but at Prabhu's feet, I finally found a place where my imperfections weren't a disqualification. I still stutter when I try to read an arti. My hands still shake when I hold the puja thali. The first time I prayed wasn't out of belief, but as a last resort.
One of her poems, one thing remarkable about how neatly she has divided her poetry into 5 sections. And one of the sections is called Fractures of Self. Fractures of Self. In the Fractures of Self, we are talking about the technique. Everything has a technique, and if you don't follow it, you are not good enough. What do you want to convey by this?
Well, I think in modern culture, especially social media, it tries to teach you how to succeed, how to live, how to feel things. And it tries to create something marketable, something palatable for people, and I didn't want to do that. I want my art to comfort the disturbed and make the comforted disturbed. So that's why I wrote this out of sheer rage, sheer fury, that, well, we're starting to lose our human essence and we are just becoming one same person and nobody has any uniqueness to them anymore. Everyone is the same, and this was in a way a rebellion against modern culture, that I refuse to fit into your mold. This is me, and I am unapologetically me.
Ah, wonderful, excellent. You find a lot of rebellion in our poems. One of the last poems is that I am a tiger, like I refuse to be tamed. I love this line, which I just read it out to you. I hold thousands of beginnings, none of them ever meet their end. So what exactly, thousands of beginnings not ending, are you somewhere in between, or you don't intend ending them? You don't want to bring them to a solution or a conclusion? What exactly you want to convey?
Well, this poem is specifically about my hobbies. Ever since I was extremely young, not that I am already not young, but so like when I was like, okay, what I used to do is I used to pick up random hobbies. You name it, I have done it. I have done very random hobbies, and I would think, this is the one. This is the one I'm going to keep doing. And I'd forget about it in like 2 years. So I think a lot of people my age, they experience that feeling of incompletion, and I find myself pondering over, what if I stayed in tennis for another 8 years? What if I did that? I would have dreamed how successful I would have been. So I think it's, again, a lot of people my age are going to relate to it, I feel, because it is a reflection of pondering over wasted potential.
Talking about potential, she's also written in one of her poems where all people end up doing things which they don't like doing. Like a poet becomes an engineer, and someone who wanted to become a historian becomes a doctor, and that kind of things. So that is also connected to this poem in some way, right? The hobby. Two of her poems, Exorcism, which I would like you to read just now in a while, and Unseen. Here the young poet is talking about, again and again, it's a recurring motif in her poetry, that I am not being recognized, that I am not getting validation. And so these two poems, you want acceptance, you want validation, you want to be appreciated. What kind of external validation are you looking for? Are you happy to know that you are good, you are confident, you don't have to seek external validation? Can you please tell us what are your thoughts on these 2 points?
I'm not going to pretend to be perfect here, because it's an extremely human thing. It's in the human nature to go ahead and seek validation and seek acceptance from other people, because again, humans are very social creatures. And I think it's very common for teenagers especially, because as I mentioned, adolescence is a transition. Even I don't understand who I am. So that's why I think it's very common for people to go out and base their self-worth on people who barely know them. And obviously, I am guilty of doing that. A lot of teenagers are, and it's a very dangerous thing to base your self-worth off of that. And it's a reflection of how I'm starting to unlearn and trying to stop seeking validation from people who barely know me, barely know my struggles, barely know what I've gone through. And I think you are your best judge.
Okay. Exorcism is a very powerful poem of hers, and I would like you to read it out, please. Page 27.
I must get rid of my old self, box away the lack of willpower, rip out the hunger for validation before it settles into the marrow of my bones. Box away the unconditional attachment, because attachment is the root of my misfortune. Nothing has ever truly belonged to me. I must learn to claim my body, my soul, and my thoughts as a territory none can trespass. I must uproot the weeds of doubt. I must destroy my old self before she destroys me.
Oh, lovely. Look at the last three lines. I must uproot the weeds of doubt. I must destroy my own self before she destroys me. Lovely, wonderful. There is this poem, Ghost. How do you get this idea that while you're alive, people don't appreciate you, and the moment one passes away, everyone says he was a good guy, he did this and did that. So you've written a poem, Ghost, that say, if you want to appreciate me, do it now. And don't make me a part of your thing. That's another good poem. Can you please read this out, Ghost? This is on page 31.
I don't want to be turned into a story for people to tell softly, like my life was born to be regretted, or an example of what one shouldn't be. I don't want my name to suddenly matter just because I'm no longer here to hear it. Don't love me in past tense. Don't gather pieces of me after I'm gone and reduce me to your grief. I am still here, messy, loud, and unfinished. If I am to be missed, let it be when I leave the room, not the world.
Look at these lines. I am still here, messy, loud, and unfinished. If I am to miss, let it be when I leave a room, not the world. Well, wonderful, excellent. In the poem Voice, you write that a poem isn't an art, but an attempt to save your mind. So this is, again, it's not an art, save your, what do you mean by save your mind?
Well, I think poetry starts where your ability to cope with life ends. So this was basically a way for me, not a way, but that is when I found out and tested the limits of what my mind could really tolerate or handle. And this poem, Voices, here art was not a form of something like something to make beautiful or something for people to display proudly. This was a form of survival for me. And this poem, Voices, it gave me a moment to slow down, recollect my thoughts, and gain my comeback. Because I think a lot of artists in general, not just poets, dancers, musicians, all of these kind of artists, I'm sure that when they do their art, they are so into it that it's a form of them to seek emotional refuge and just forget about the world for a moment. That's what I wanted to convey here in Voices.
Okay, great. Since you're talking about what's going on in your mind, Kiara, I would like to take you back to the poetry of remembrance. Ladies and gentlemen, when you write about in the memory of someone who's passed away, in her case, her grandfather, in fact, she lost both the grandfathers in a short span of time. And so, maternal and paternal, and she's feeling that. So you've written, she's already read out Mango Season, and these are the poems of grief that you write, of memory, nostalgia, remembrance. They are called poetry of remembrance. In the last JLF, I got an opportunity to moderate, and I was in conversation with Professor Marashi Lal. It was known as poetry of remembrance. Now, Kiara, my question to you is to take you back to those poems that you wrote about memory. After writing the poems on your grandfather, Mango Season, and 4 or 5 poems that you've written, did you feel some kind of a relief? Or did you undergo catharsis, as we call it in literature?
Well, these poems, they were a vessel for me to place all the grief I had, and I didn't know what to do with it. Because I strongly believe that memory is the closest thing we have to resurrection. And overall, these poems, they're a way for me to hold on to something which I'm so scared of forgetting. And things which seemed so trivial in the moment, like cutting the onion or eating the mangoes, I started appreciating them so much more when it was gone. So again, this was also a form of documentation for me in a sense of the memories which I am paranoid about forgetting. So yes, there was catharsis, but there wasn't closure.
Oh, what an amazing. There was catharsis, but not a closure. Wonderful, absolutely. Kiara has also written relationship poems. On another way, it might look like love poetry, but she clarifies it's not the romance kind of love poetry. See, but they are relationship poems, and these are wonderful poems, some of them. From your love poetry is always about loss, longing, pain, nostalgia, broken heart. Do you agree?
Partially, yes, I do. Well, I think love is something which humans, we long for, we fear losing it, and we lose it. So I think not just my poetry, but a lot of love poetry, it carries melancholy, and a lot of melancholy. My poems, they are a depiction of the seemingly again trivial moments in my spiritual love, the moments of comfort I've sought in my friends, and all the happy moments I've had, and some sad ones, of course, because I've lost a lot of people, not just by death, but some circumstances which we can't control. So again, it was a coping mechanism for me, and love poetry, it's not, I don't think it should ever be reduced to something like heartbreak, because love is something so beautiful, and mostly the love poetry which I've written at least, it is an exploration of emotional intensity, not just heartbreak.
Great. That's wonderful. So can you, out of these 4 or 5 relationship poems that you've written, can you read out one? Maybe you can read out read out the moon.
I think of you at every opportunity. You're my best friend, my soulmate. I love you like I love the moon, as it goes through all its phases. You're everything I wished for throughout my life. And when your arms are around me, I'd swear I'm holding the stars. Your company feels like the radiance of the sun after a terribly long winter. And I will love you the way you deserve to be loved, but haven't been.
Delusion and denial. She talks about how we are, the delusion, how we live in a world of delusion, and how this also gets connected to denial. So can you please tell us something about these 2 important points you raised in your poetry?
Well, I feel, as I explained, it's quite an underexplored emotion, and it is something which, again, we all have felt. Delusion is something which you go to when you can't deal with the emotions you are currently avoiding, whilst denial is something where you try to, it's a form of survival for some people, but obviously it's extremely dangerous because it prevents self-growth. And delusion and denial both combined, they end up giving you a false hope in a future where there is nothing, and it gives you imagined versions of people, relationships, and your future. So overall, I really wanted to touch upon my struggles with how I have deluded about my future, that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and how eventually it's fallen back really hard on me.
So the denial part, what was that with delusion? There is a poem on denial as well. Can you explain that along with it?
The poem on denial. One second.
Okay, let's go forward. What do you want to explain by wasted potential? I mentioned to you about, a poet ends up becoming an engineer, and someone who wants to do arts, parents force them to do science, and someone who doesn't want to become a doctor is forced to become a doctor, so that kind of thing. So this poem also explains like wasted potential. Can you please read this out?
This poem is one which is again very, very, very close to my heart and my experiences, because I always wanted to be an actress, but then now I'm considering of pursuing psychology. But that aside, I've noticed, I think this is something that just surpasses generations. I'm sure not just Gen Z, I'm sure the millennials, the boomers, they can relate to how you have had to sacrifice your interest and your like emotional fulfillment for stability. And I think that is such a universal concept of how a lot of people, I'm sure, like, for example, if I know someone who's into Kathak, I know someone, she's older, and she had to quit Kathak for sciences. And I think that truly saddened me, because not just her, not just me, I'm sure a lot of people who have had to let go of their passions have felt this. And again, they must be pondering over, what if I just rebelled against what everyone else said and I did it? Where would I be now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just read out some parts of a poem. Nothing kills motivation like the real world. Look at this line. Where dancers are glued to desks, where poets are practicing medicine, where the singers are silenced because no one listens. We are consumed by the poison. What if it's feed us and dare to ask why they feel so sick? Excellent point. Okay, so we go to the your last part of the section before we will ask people to. You come to the thing returning to light. So, ladies and gentlemen, you will find poems which have talked about grief, loss, longing, sadness, but they end with a positive. The last section calls it returning to light. So, what exactly do your last category of poems convey? That there is hope, there is an aspiration to move forward, and you're looking forward to the new life, overcoming all your hassles. What exactly would you like to convey?
Well, I would like to add one thing. The collection, I initially wanted to name it Samsara because it is a reflection of the cyclic process of the Hindu or Sanskrit process of life, death, and rebirth. So the last part is a reflection of my healing journey as it continues, because the winter isn't forever, neither is the spring. It's gonna come again, no matter what. So it's a cycle, it's a constant cycle which I'm still learning to deal with and learning to navigate through the brutal winter and the beautiful spring.
So samsara, how do you explain it? It's a cycle. So you have a poem by the title Samsara. Please read it out.
Every healed person has a past, just like how every suffering person has a future. Healing takes time. I'm slowly learning to make peace with the time. I'm learning to be a good person, not just prove I am one. A new cycle begins, and I will try again.
Wonderful. I would like to read out my favorite poem in in this. It's called Pani Puri. I believe life is like Pani Puri, sweet, sour and messy. It spins in the aluminium plate like the cycles of samsara. Sometimes the puri cracks in the bowl, just like my thoughts split all over the place. Messy, sour, sweet, this is samsara. No matter how far my world may spin, it will always roll me back to where I truly belong. What a wonderful thought. So how would you define your last poem, which is second last, is it about the tiger? We are saying that you refuse to be tamed absolutely and you are all set to conquer the world.
Conquer the world, that's a bit of a stretch. So, as I write here, defiance inspires me like a tiger inspires a cat. So the cat here, again, I'm going to bring in a little bit of biology here. So a cat is a member of the feline community, if I am correct. So the tiger is obviously the predator and the cat is the tameable house cat. And I am that cat looking at all the tigers in my life. The tigers being my family members and my friends. And I am so inspired by all of them. And defiance is the tiger for me. And I just want to show here, this is like a subtle act of rebellion. It's not one I'm going to declare so loudly that, oh, I don't care about the system, goodbye. No. It's a very subtle act of rebellion where I don't want to show that I'm losing my cool, and I'm showing here that basically.
Why don't you read it out?
Yeah, I think it
Read out this poem. It's a wonderful poem, Tiger.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with William Blake's Tiger.
No, also because I've always had a connection to tigers since I was very young, so that's why I called it Tiger. Defiance inspires me like a tiger inspires a cat. It claws at my chest, refusing to stay quiet. It teaches me to run against the current, to chase what terrifies me, just to prove I can bare my teeth when they expect me to sit silent, to refuse the life others want me to live. Like a tiger to a cat, it reminds me I was never meant to be tamed.
Wonderful. I was never meant to be tamed. It's a powerful line. So, ladies and gentlemen, the last part is poem is about resuscitation, renewal, revival, looking forward to something. Before I open the house, I would like to tell you that contemporary English poetry, you can write about anything. The modern poets like Eliot and Ezra Pound had told us that there is a Lakshman Rekha you can't cross. But when the confessional American poets came like Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton and all, that line was broken. Today you can write about anything, you can use any language. Her title is Pani Puri. So this is contemporary poetry you can use, and you can write about anything, your personal, impersonal, any writer that impacts you can write a poem. So that has been a great session. Thank you. And we'll open into the house if anyone wants to ask a question. Who is going to pass the mic?
I want to ask.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Tarushi, please bring the mic.
Here, there's the mic.
Thank you. Just this, just this symbol that you have, it looks very interesting on the book. Does it have any significance?
No, it doesn't. It was chosen for me. But it's quite wonderful.
Very nice. I just thought maybe this.
But I did interpret it as a person, as a dancing person. So maybe it is a reflection of
being
returning to light, yes.
Yeah, sort of being free.
Yes.
I thought that also. But I just wanted to ask. Yeah, okay. It's very nice.
Tarushi, give the mic to anyone wanting to ask a question.
Hi, Kiara. Are you really 14?
Yes, I'm 14.
Oh,
I'm 14.
seriously?
In the poem also, I've written a poem September 2011.
No,
That's my
this
poem.
is a rhetorical question. Okay. You're not answering that. How important do you think that you being facile in English? I can see you're very comfortable in writing and speaking English. How important do you think being facile in this language help you in expressing your thoughts? A. B is, do you read other poems? And do you really get inspired by other poetry to express your feelings, or is just whatever comes to you that you write?
Kiara, you were saying you get inspired by music, you can answer that also.
That's a truly, truly wonderful question. While I may not be as educated in the poetry department, I have read certain poems. As for authors, my favorites are classic Gulzar. I love Gulzar. And I like Sylvia Plath as well, again, as Jack mentioned, for her confessional poetry style, which really aligns with my rawness. So yeah, I do think it is quite important to be very well versed in language, to be able to coherently put forward your thoughts, and I think it just makes everything much easier for the reader as well. And as for my inspiration, not just poetry, I'm not going to pretend as if I am a poetic genius. I'm very deeply inspired by music. I'm a classical violinist, so I tend to listen to music when I write because it helps create a flow of thoughts. And when I listen to lyrics, I listen to music which has a lot of deep symbolism, a lot of deep meaning to it. Like, for example, I listen to 21 Pilots when I'm writing, so the message is in the back of my head as I continue to write. So it kind of gives me like a blank canvas, or like, in a sense, an inspiration. So I'm inspired by music and certain poets. Thank you for the question.
Also, Kiara, I think each and every person sitting here right now is deeply impressed by the fact that a girl who's just 14, how could she have such a mature mind, mature thinking, emotionally so mature, where you're writing about emotions that even touch our hearts. So I'm sure Gen Z, for them, you are a great inspiration. And I think you should go places to inspire them. Please make them your audiences, because today many of the children do not know what to do. The way you explained your emotions through poetry is amazing, really amazing. And you do deserve a big round of applause for that. I just wanted to ask you two very short questions. One, I was thinking while you were being, it's almost like a chat interview where so many questions were thrown at you and so confidently you answered. Were you uncomfortable inside your heart or nervous that will I be able to answer this? Because the audience is very mature, almost all senior citizens sitting here. And second, where do you want to go from here? What is your next goal? Because you are an achiever at 14. So what are your dreams and goals? That's what I wanted to ask.
That's a really, really nice question, and I'm very happy to answer that. So I'm going to be very honest. I was really scared before this, and I did rehearse a lot in my mind. In fact, as a form of preparation for me, this copy, I think I've written over what I have written in this. I've written those many notes because I think you can never be too prepared. And as for confidence, I've been given such an environment by my parents, by my family, where talking about emotions is so normal and it's encouraged actually. So I think that's why I'm so confident in myself. And as for the senior citizens part, as I mentioned with my grandfather, I'm very close to senior citizens, and in fact, they are the members of society which have my utmost respect. And I think I'm very emotional around senior citizens as well. So that's why it was so easy for me. It was a piece of cake for me. And as for my future goals, because I struggled so much with my mental health, and I am still trying to come out from it strong. I want to be a psychologist. I want to help people, not that I haven't received the help. Of course, I've received ample help in the world. I want to make that resource available for everyone else. And for those who it may not be accepted, because Indian society, unfortunately, not just India, maybe other countries as well, it's still quite taboo to talk about your mental health. And again, as the younger generation, I just want to break that standard. And that's why I wrote this book, so people, maybe, they find themselves in me.
I believe you're already working on your second anthology. You're already working on our second anthology. Any more questions?
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm very happy and honored to see you of the third generation that I'm seeing. You are Mr. B.R. Paula. B.R. Ram was a very close friend of mine, and you were police for 38 years or 39 years. Not in the police service, I was a doctor, and I still work after retirement as a consultant with the Taj Group of Hotels. But what exactly inspired you? I had treated your two generations, your grandmother and your parents and everybody, but nobody was ever into literature or writing poems. And Mr. Wallach was always a tough cop, but always using Marwari and Hindi combination, but never in English. And he was always beating people, but it was tough. So what inspired for you to go into poetry and literature?
Okay. So, as for literature, my Dadi's father, my great Nana, his blessings are still with me, and I've been told that a lot of people see him in me, and that is truly such a great honor because he is my role model. In fact, if I am correct, he took the first court case, and I think he was the only English-speaking lawyer in Haryana at the time, which is a huge deal. So he was also a fanatic for literature, so I think that's where I get it from. And as for my inspiration, I think the passing of my Dada, Mr. B.R. Paula, was a turning point for me when I finally, after 2 years, I picked up the pen and I decided to write.
Excellent, yeah.
Can you hear me? I wanted to ask, why in every chapter you put a new person doing a new movement? By that I mean...
Yeah. So every chapter has a new person, a new movement. Okay. So as I said, this looks like a dancing person to a lot of people, and there's obviously different moves in dance. So the different person on each chapter symbolizes a different phase in my life.
Okay. Very nice. Any more questions? Okay. Tusharika will now propose the vote of thanks. Just before she does, let me say that Kiara will be available here to sign the books later. She will be at the podium to stand and sign for each one of you. You can get yourself photographed also. And ladies and gentlemen, please do have tea and snacks before you leave. Over to you, Tusharika.
Thank you so much, Kiara. It's truly unbelievable the kind of poetry that you've written at just 14, and I think it's also remarkably brave of you to put it out there for the readers. And it's been an absolute joy listening to your poetry and to your reflections. Also, thank you to Mr. Jagdeep Singh for moderating this session in a very engaging way. I would like to place on record our sincere thanks to the royal family of Jaipur for giving us this beautiful venue time and again to host these literary discussions, and also to our gifting partner, Port Silver. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for being here with us, stepping out in this heat and participating in this session with so much enthusiasm. Thank you, and the books are available at the back. Please do pick up a copy, and the author is here for signings. Yes, thank you. can burn a cup of tea for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming here. It means a lot.